Ladies and gentlemen, today the world stands at a dangerous and historic crossroads. We are not speaking about distant headlines or abstract geopolitics. We are talking about a full-blown war unfolding between the United States, Israel, and Iran. In the past few days, joint U.S. and Israeli strikes have targeted Iran's leadership and strategic capabilities, including the killing of Iran's supreme leader. And Tehran's retaliation has already spread across the Middle East. Embassies have closed, airspace is shut, missiles have launched, and global markets are reeling. What was once a simmering tension has erupted into a conflict that threatens not just a region, but the security of every nation that trades, travels, or hopes for peace in the 21st century. The question we must ask ourselves isn't if this war will change the world, it's how drastically and how soon. A world doesn't shift in silence. It shifts in the split second when certainty collapses and instinct takes over. When the United States and Israel moved from restrained tension to open conflict with Iran, men across the globe felt something ancient awaken. The pull to protect, to anticipate danger, to scan the horizon for what comes next. Women felt it too, not in the same wiring, but in the intuitive awareness of emotional undercurrents, the fear beneath the headlines, and the ripple effect conflict has on families, relationships, and the fragile balance of daily life. A conflict like this doesn't just redraw geopolitical lines, it exposes the invisible battles happening inside every man. The need to stay strong while uncertainty grows louder. The pressure to appear unshaken while the world tips toward chaos. The internal war between courage and vulnerability, between wanting to act and knowing some things are far beyond personal control. A moment like this forces us to confront the psychology of conflict itself. Men feel the surge of responsibility, the call to lead, to stand firm, to stay focused. Women watch the emotional armor tighten, sensing both the resilience and the silent weight carried underneath. And as the global stage erupts, these internal dynamics quietly shape how individuals, families, and entire societies respond to the unfolding storm. A war becomes everyone's war the moment it disrupts the quiet assumptions we build our lives on. What is unfolding between the United States, Israel, and Iran is not confined to borders or belief systems. It reaches into the psychology of men everywhere. Men feel the instinctive pull to assess threats, to secure their families, to make sense of a world that suddenly feels less predictable. Women feel the emotional currents that accompany that shift, the tightening posture, the shorter words, the unspoken pressure men place on themselves to stay composed when global stability fractures. A conflict of this scale matters because it shakes the foundation men rely on to plan, protect, and provide. When nations collide, economies shake. When economies shake, futures feel uncertain. And when futures feel uncertain, the male instinct to prepare intensifies. Women notice this long before men admit it out loud. The restless thinking, the quiet withdrawal, the mental calculation of what if, turning into what now. A war like this becomes a mirror, reflecting how deeply interconnected we are. Men sense the widening ripple effects through fuel prices, global markets, and political alliances, each one adding weight to the internal load they carry. Women witness how global tension reshapes a man's emotional landscape even when he insists he's fine, revealing the hidden ways global conflict reaches into homes, relationships, and the choices we make about safety, purpose, and responsibility. A single strike becomes a firestorm the moment intentions collide with unpredictable consequences. When the first blow was delivered in this conflict involving the United States, Israel, and Iran, it wasn't just a military action. It was a psychological shockwave that men around the world felt instantly. Men are wired to anticipate the chain reaction, to calculate the next move, to brace for impact long before the world admits the escalation has begun. Women perceive it differently, sensing the tension beneath a man's attempt to appear steady, noticing the change in tone, the sharper focus, the silent scanning of possibilities. A regional firestorm doesn't ignite only on maps. It ignites inside the minds of men who understand that one action, even if strategic, can unravel into chaos. Men feel the instinctive pressure to stay vigilant, to analyze outcomes, to protect their families from uncertainty they can't control. Women watch this defensive posture form, the emotional armor, the withdrawn thinking, the weight of responsibility settling in even when nothing has reached their doorstep yet. A crisis like this expands faster than logic can contain it. What was meant to be a targeted strike became a catalyst that stirred alliances, provoked retaliation, and awakened primal instincts in men everywhere. Women sense the changing emotional climate around them. Feeling the tension, men try to mask. Recognizing how global conflict can transform their behavior, their communication, and their sense of stability long before the full ramifications appear. A global shockwave hits hardest when it disrupts the systems people rely on without ever thinking about them. As the conflict involving the United States, Israel, and Iran intensifies, it sends tremors through economies, energy supplies, and the entire global security structure. Men feel these disruptions first as a shift in responsibility, a sense that the stability they counted on is suddenly fragile. Women feel the emotional resonance of that shift, noticing how men become more guarded, more analytical, more burdened by the need to adapt to an uncertain world. Economic instability doesn't just change the numbers on a screen, it changes how men think, plan, and prioritize. Men feel pressure mount as prices fluctuate, markets shake, and global trade becomes unpredictable. Women observe the subtle internal recalculations, the quiet budgeting, the distant expression, the instinctive tightening of focus that signals a man is preparing for impact even if he doesn't voice it. A disruption in energy and security creates a deeper psychological effect than most admit. Men feel an ancient instinct activate when supply chains strain and geopolitical alliances falter. The need to stay alert, to anticipate risk, to protect the people they love. Women notice how global instability reshapes a man's behavior, the way he becomes more watchful, more serious, more protective, revealing how events on the world stage create ripple effects that reach far beyond borders and into the emotional rhythm of everyday life. A crossroads becomes real the moment the world recognizes that every path forward carries a cost. As the conflict among the United States, Israel, and Iran deepens, the choices ahead: escalation, containment, or diplomacy are not abstract geopolitical terms. They are psychological triggers that shape how men process the unfolding crisis. Men instinctively evaluate scenarios, weighing the risks of a wider war against the hope for restraint. Women sense this inner analysis, noticing how men grow quieter, more inward, more focused on outcomes they feel responsible for but cannot directly influence. Escalation is not just a military term, it is a psychological escalation inside the minds of men who feel compelled to prepare for worst-case scenarios. Men interpret rising tensions as signals to strengthen their emotional guard, to forecast threats, to brace themselves for the impact of global decisions. Women witness this shift as a tightening of demeanor, a shorter tone, a distant stare, a seriousness that reflects a man's attempt to maintain control amidst uncertainty. Containment, on the other hand, challenges men in a different way. It forces them to wrestle with restraint, patience, and the ability to stay composed while crises simmer. Men feel the strain of holding steady when everything around them suggests volatility. Women recognize the controlled tension, sensing the effort it takes for men to manage fear without expressing it, to stay rational while absorbing emotional shockwaves. Diplomacy becomes the most complex path because it demands trust in dialogue over force. Men often struggle with the vulnerability embedded in compromise, especially when global stakes are high. Women see how this option highlights a man's internal conflict, the desire for peace clashing with the instinct to defend and protect. Each path forward shapes not only nations but the emotional landscapes of the people watching, hoping, and bracing for what comes next. A future is truly decided the moment we admit that the path ahead is not chosen by nations alone, but by the psychology of the people who live within them. As the conflict involving the United States, Israel, and Iran unfolds, the world is pushed toward a defining choice: pursue peace or surrender to a cycle of perpetual war. Men feel this decision internally long before it appears on any diplomatic table. They sense the weight of responsibility, the danger of uncertainty, and the instinctive drive to protect what they love in a world that feels increasingly unstable. Women feel the emotional vibration of that shift, picking up on the subtle changes in posture, tone, and focus that reveal how deeply the conflict influences a man's state of mind. A choice between peace and war becomes personal when men realize that instability reshapes their role as protectors, providers, and anchors within their families and communities. The prospect of perpetual conflict awakens their instinct to stay alert, to anticipate threats, and to prepare for outcomes far beyond their control. Women observe how this internal vigilance transforms everyday behavior, the quiet planning, the sharper awareness, the guarded energy that signals a man bracing against the unknown. A pursuit of peace challenges men in a different way, demanding a kind of courage that is quieter, but no less powerful. Peace requires vulnerability, the willingness to trust, and the strength to believe in resolution over domination. Men wrestle with this tension deeply because choosing peace feels both noble and risky in a world where aggression often appears to win. Women witness this internal struggle, sensing how hope and fear coexist within a man who wants stability but is conditioned to prepare for conflict. A future shaped by peace or perpetual war ultimately becomes a reflection of these internal battles, the struggle between fear and vision, instinct and wisdom, reaction and intention, playing out not only on the global stage, but in the hearts and minds of ordinary people trying to navigate an extraordinary moment in history.